Welcome to the 1871 podcast, and I'm joined by Johnny Hunt, my co-host, Dylan Kerr, and you've got me as well, Mark Roach. And on this episode, we'll be focusing on Reading FC's academy, and I'm delighted to welcome a very special guest, Kobina Elliott, who until January was a coach for Reading FC's academy. So, Kobina, welcome, and thanks very much for joining us.
Hi there, guys. Yeah, no worries.
Oh, yeah.
And on the topic, Johnny, of Reading's academy, we saw a debut for 16-year-old Andre Garcia on Tuesday in the 2-1 win against Burton Albion. So that's great to see. And Johnny, with everything else that's been going on at the club, the academy continues to show, how good it still is.
Yeah, definitely. Had a great debut, I thought, for a young lad coming in, in difficult circumstances, but didn't look out of place. And another one for the future. Like you say, it's unreal how we keep finding talents when probably we haven't got. It's probably the best way because we haven't got another choice. We haven't got a big squad, so these youngsters are getting the chance to play first team men's football at an early age, which can only be good for their development.
Yeah, and Kobina, you left Reading Academy in January. You've been there for 8 years, and you were telling us before we started the episode that you've worked with all age groups from, I think it's sort of 10 to 16. So tell us a little bit about your background at Reading, at the academy there. The age groups you coach, and if there's any players that during your time that you work with that have come through into the first team, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I started at Reading. Prior to Reading, I was at the working for the Football Association in basically their national kind of program, and I was able to start working at Reading through the Premier League, actually, through a Premier League program, bursary program that was giving black and minority ethnic coaches a potential opportunity to be involved in academy coaching. So that was kind of my entry point into Reading. But alongside that as well, I'd worked with a local charity and youth football teams called Right Choice Community Sports Association prior to the FA. So and that club had quite a prominent role in getting boys opportunities at clubs at Reading, but also London clubs like Chelsea and others as well. So through those links, I got in contact with the coaches at Reading whilst I was at the FA because I was interested in getting into coaching kids with really high potential, which is what academy football is. So then yeah, from there I was able to start at Reading, and like you say, I was there for 8 years. Yeah, in terms of players or being in that environment for a long time, yeah, quite a lot of the boys that actually links to what's happening in the club, where a lot of the boys that made their debut, let's say in the last 2 seasons, I'd seen them, or worked with them, or known the family and stuff like that from a very young age. Like players like Nelson Abbey, I actually knew or coached Nelson even before he got signed at Reading. So I coached Nelson at 10, 11 years old. Yeah, players like that moved on now. Like so, Caelan Vickers was the first age group. Actually, my interview, the interview of my interview to get the job at Reading, it was his age group, and I remember a player like him, seeing him at the interview, thinking, "Whoa, if this is what it's like." Initially, I got a really strong first impression from a kid like Caelan. Yeah, so there, and not just boys that had made debuts necessarily for Reading, but there are quite a few boys that have gone off to other academies prior to debut as well. So it does show, the potential of what Reading's academy is. Like even though it's done some unbelievable things in terms of debuts recently, there's still a lot of potential in there to do more.
And also, of course, we've mentioned Michael Olise a few times on this podcast. How much of him did you see coming through the academy before he broke into the first team?
Yeah, so I worked alongside members of staff again that they've done great job at Reading for a long time. So I worked alongside coach called Chris Sweetman, who's still academy coach at Reading now, and the scout, who's been at Reading a long time, Brendan Flanagan, and they actually were the members of staff that were at Reading that knew of Michael when he was at Chelsea. And it didn't work out for him at Chelsea, but they'd seen him play against Reading. Again, that's the benefit of being Cat 1 as well. We play against some of the best players in the in the region or highest potential, not necessarily best because they're still kids, but highest potential players. So I think they had a really big influence in terms of Michael coming to Reading in the first place, at the age of around 15, 16, I believe. So yeah, I saw Michael and was around Michael whilst he was an under-18s player, at the club. And it's so interesting because you have young players at 16, 17, 18. Players have to go through stuff, and perception of players might be a particular way whilst they're 16, 17, 18, and you need particular people that really have a feel and understanding of what he played in the Champions League last night, didn't he, for Bayern Munich? So what Champions League potential really looks like. Not everyone sees that, but the people that do see it end up giving kids an opportunity. Sometimes where others are saying it this early, or others are saying not for me for certain reasons. I think it's really important to see that. Yeah, but Michael always had a belief when he's on the football pitch. He has a personal feel for how outstanding he is and can be, and that's very important for a player of his style.
And Dylan, I want to bring you in now because you came to Reading from Leeds, so you were, you went straight into the first team, but you played in the team with players that had come through from youth level. Stuart Lovell, for example, and obviously you've coached young players as well. And what Kobina was saying there about Michael Olise having that belief, it is of course about talent, but it's about having that belief and that resilience and that determination and character as well, isn't it? I guess as a young player.
Yeah, and also the coach that academies. We never had academies; it was just under 18s. And you had a reserve team and the first team. That was it. There was no academies. You had junior football clubs that were linked to Leeds United. We didn't have an academy at Reading. You James Lambert. You forgot to mention James Lambert, David Bass, Lee Barkus, all potentially Scotty Taylor, all potentially had a talent. Lee Barkus had a very nasty injury that kind of killed his career. Scotty Taylor went on to become Scotty Taylor, Archie, and Lambert. He's one of the players that if I was James Lambert now, I'd be kicking myself with all the talent that kid had. Just went to waste. But it wasn't purely his fault. It was the club's fault because of a guy that's got that ability at that young age. It needs to be nurtured, needs to be looked after. But back in the day, you never had that. You were just either shoved into the first team, or you were left out, and you struggled to get in because the first team were doing very, very well. But there's an interesting story, and when I joined Leeds, I got to Ellen Road, and we used to train right outside the ground, which is now the car park. And it was myself, Gary Speed, Simon Grayson, Mickey Whitlow. Obviously, Dave Batty was, a first team regular. And the competition was really, really high. And Gary Speed was an apprentice. He was coming to the end of his contract, and Howard didn't fancy him. Howard Wilkinson wasn't very keen on offering him a pro contract. But the youth team coach, Pete Gumby, who was a legend in that junior role as a manager and a coach, he told Howard to give him a year, take a chance on him. And, like Elise and like a lot of young players, it's not about a talent or ability. It's about how much you wanted it. And Speedo, that we all know, went on to build such a great career, not just as a footballer, but as a manager as well and coach. And you've got to look at that people like that may not have the ability and the individual brilliance that a lot of players do have, but it's that desire to want to be the best that ends up getting you to be the best. So yeah, if I look at, you know, the background that I got brought up as a young player, and the people that I worked alongside and brought into the game, both you know, in my coaching career, both home and abroad, you always know there's a special player. There's no, you know, distinguishing who's going to be brilliant, who's not going to be brilliant. But you know the difference is the ones who want to be brilliant, the ones who want to spend that extra 20 minutes on the training field, want to go to the coach and say, Coach, give me some advice, give me some tips, give me some help. Even go to players. I don't know if that happens anymore. You might be able to tell me how Reading's academy works with the first team. But when I was playing, the youth team always played with the first team, and that gave you that experience to learn to be your trade, learn, you know, to be respectful, also learn to be competitive. You know, and that's what made our teams at Reading and at Leeds and at Sheffield Wednesday and at Kilmarnock very competitive. Because as a 28, 29, 30-year-old player that's got a 17-year-old that's coming and, you know, wanting your position, you had to make sure that, you know, you kept him, you know, where he belonged, cleaning your boots and, you know, making sure you got your cup of coffee in the morning. But you also, you know, give him the, you know, encouragement to say, right, yeah, come on, you know, go for your dream and make it happen. Because that'll make me a better player. Because I know somebody's breathing down my neck. So it's great when you've got talent, but it's even better when you've got people with heart who want to be talented. And all the tools are there for them in the academies now. We didn't have the luxury of what a category 1, category 2, even category 3 teams are like. You know, we just turned up for training, had a cup of coffee, had a cup of tea from the teapot. We didn't have any coffee machines. You know, there were no lattes. It was just either milk and sugar or black. Now, you know, everything's there for players now. And with Reading, as you said, they've got a transfer embargo. They can't sign players. They've got to look at the academy. And if you give a 16, 17-year-old an opportunity to play at the Medeski in front of however many fans on a Tuesday night, you can only look at the positives from it rather than the negatives. As long as the people around him keep his feet firmly on the ground and keep his head out the sky.
And like Johnny was saying that Garcia, you know, 16, he certainly didn't look out of place on his debut. And, you know, on Dylan's point there, coming back to you, Kobina, obviously things have changed. So Reading, you know, were playing other Category 1 teams, and you saw those players, and that's how Michael Olise came to Reading. What's the process like? So if you work with a player from, say, under 10, you know, how do they, what's the process of getting them to a point where you then identify their real potential?
Sorry, just clarify that. The process in terms of when you feel like they might be ready or be able to be a professional, or what do you mean?
Yeah, so you're preparing, you know, we all know that there'll be a group of players and then a small percentage of them will go on to become professional players. That's the reality. So when you get to a point where you've identified a young player in the academy, whether he's 12 or 14 or 15 or whatever, is there anything that changes in terms of the development and the focus on, you know, helping to give them that edge, whether it's belief, confidence, resilience, whatever it is? Is there anything that sort of kicks in around 14, 15, 16? So, you know, the lad that made his debut, obviously, you know, there were discussions between the first team and the academy. Everyone felt he was ready, so he was brought in. But where does the tipping point come in terms of, yeah, he might actually, you know, have what it takes?
It's an interesting question, and probably where let's say where a club where Readings are in relation to some of the restrictions that are on the first team at the moment are bringing about certain opportunities. So you've almost got two ways to look, two answers almost, where normal functioning, let's say, is the academy starts in terms of official registration under nines, and it ends in terms, or sorry, professional contracts can be offered, let's say at the age of what's about 17, let's say 6 months before they can officially can sign a pro. Now, at any point, not at any point, debuts are, the youngest debuts, a young debut, even in the decades gone, you're talking if a kid is 16 years old and can play with men at most levels, really, is something of note. But definitely, if you're talking the top couple of tiers, top two, three tiers of English football, being able to play at 16 is a fantastic achievement. So, in terms of how it should go is, well, how it does go, you'd imagine, is each year there's basically, rightly or wrongly, there's a refining process, where there are registration windows where, let's say, under 12s, under 14s, under 16s, the club has to decide which players are going to be retained to go through for the next 2 years and which players aren't. So there's a natural kind of refining process happening there. I mean, I don't know if anyone will be upset by this or not, but I have to say, if Reading were not in an embargo, a lot less boys at the age of 16, 17, 18 would be considered. However, what's happened in the last 2 years has happened. They've been considered. If you actually look at let's say, look at some stats, metrics, etc., as to, well, how's that gone? One, from a football perspective, two, from like a fans and, what, academy products mean, but probably most prominently from a business perspective, what that's done and what that could do. I think it makes you ask the question. Yeah, it almost asks the question straight right back to you and maybe to people that run clubs and stuff. How are you? How are you working out whether you do have boys that are ready and boys that aren't? Because a lot of the boys that are 16, 17, let's just go from a, let's say, physical/technical perspective, there are probably quite a few boys that, if it was tailored a particular way, could be tested as to whether they could add value and by when. And that might affect how clubs are run and stuff like that, because it's a trust-based thing. And at the end of the day, in this situation, Reading don't have a choice but to trust. And in the trust that they've shown some, it's shown that actually, maybe you can trust young players a little bit more. But that said, like you say, there has to be a lot of safeguards, the right coach, the right way of approaching and helping the young players. But also, there has to be an element of readiness, because you would know if they're absolutely not ready, you probably are going to find out maybe in 15, 20 games anyway. Sometimes 0 to 5 games, you might be able to survive a little bit. But yeah, 25 games, you'll know if they're not ready. So, but I think there's the way the system is and how good you can see in the England youth teams as well. And I'm going on a bit, but England youth teams in the last 10 years, whatever, have been very, very good, much better than previously. And I think that's a lot to do with academies as well. So I think there are opportunities there for young players.
And Johnny, when I hand over to you now, I'm sure you've got, want to get some insight from Kobina.
Yeah, Kobina, I was just interested, with when you're having to make decisions on players leaving, how hard is that? I don't know, for a young kid, as a coach, and for a young kid and their families, and also, like, what supports are there for players that leave, and also just generally around sort of the mental health of young footballers that you care for.
Yeah,
those kind of things.
I think it's a great question from an academy point of view. I think it's one of the biggest things, and having the right people across the departments, because it is what makes you category one is the staff base in areas like player care, psychology, parent support aspects, etc., etc. So those things have to be in place and are really, really important. But the biggest thing in relation to players leaving is the right information being shared and the openness as they're coming in. So sometimes boys and naturally and families will have a Disneyland perspective of yeah, I'm at a pro club, I'm an academy, blah blah. But I think it's really important that something that we had when we always communicated with players was you are going to leave, even if that means getting to the first team and it goes great and getting sold. Then positive thing, you leave on a thing. You might get to all the way to 21s and not get a pro contract. I think that kind of openness, truthfulness about what the process is and what the transparency of it
Yeah.
is really important. And then one of the things that I know the staff in the club now say, and we always say, is it's really important that there's no surprises, because at the end of the day, a kid and their parents, whether even if sometimes you get some of the difficult parents, you know if a kid is either thriving, kind of surviving, or is struggling a little bit, or struggling a lot. Usually you would hope that if your recruitment has been right, even right from the babies, that you don't want to put any child, it's like putting a child in a swimming pool or whatever in water that's too deep. You wouldn't want to do that, right? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing within a process like this. You want to recruit boys that have the markers and have the potential, but also the current capability to survive at least. But you will always get, you might see a boy at, let's say, 9, and they, like, as an example, they might be a really physical boy at 9 in relation to others. So
Yeah.
they've grown earlier and they're really powerful, so they're succeeding. It might get to 12 now, where that physical advantage that they had is matched up. And what your man's just said of the importance of really wanting to strive and practice, etc. Kid might not have had that. They just might have been really effective at 9, and the club have gone, that's potential. But then you see at 12, actually, he's not as physical as we thought. And for the last 3 years, he's maybe not that into, they're still babies. So he's not as into football as he might need to be by 13 and 14. But it's really important that, let's say, at the end of that 12's year is going to be at the end of his journey at this club. It doesn't just end. So many boys have left, let's say, even like, yeah, a Reading or anywhere else. Or Michael, as an example, has left another club and come to Reading, and now he's at Bayern Munich. So even that information of leaving a club doesn't mean that the road is over. It ends when you choose it to end. So just being transparent. But yeah, at the start of the season, if it's looking like a boy may be struggling or may not get that contract to go, it's very, very important that you share that information with the parents early. And
Yeah.
you go, these are the things that he's probably going to need to work on. These are kind of the markers for where we think he's improving or not. So then it might be 4 months before the boy actually leaves, there's no surprise. So
Yeah.
that process is kind of supported appropriately so that they can move on in a positive way. And then it's followed up as
Yeah.
they, even after they go, it's followed up by player care to check into that, etc., etc.
That's really good.
And Kobina, obviously it's been a difficult time for the club in general, and going back to, I think it was Christmas, the coaches at Reading's Academy started getting released, cost
Yeah.
cutting measures, and
The
then
coaches get released as well. See, so it's not just the kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And although we'd probably say that was for different reasons, that was due to financial reasons, etc. But um, with that in mind, actually, to your point there, that you're preparing these young children and their parents that you might not make it, but we'll help you if you move on, if you leave Reading. We're gonna help you the best we can, and you prepare them for that. But the contrast to that with you and the other coaches that were released was that must have been a difficult time, because there was that story that come out that the training ground was going to be sold and all that stuff.
Mm.
Um, what was that like for you and the other coaches? Because Eddie Niedzwiecki played at Chelsea, played for Wales. Really good coach. He left. Um, what was that like? So I think there were quite a few coaches that left as well, wasn't there? So how kind of challenging for you and the other coaches was that period?
Yeah, I think I have to be open and but also respectful that I think the big part of it, and like I say, it was my 16th, 17th year overall working, let's say, full time in youth sport, let's say. And the biggest thing, obviously professionally, you develop different things over the time. But one of the biggest things for me, and like you say, we have to speak with parents and boys all the time, is I think I saw something online, you see stuff online where they say someone said recently that your the biggest job security you can have is your competence. And I really noted that, where I think we've been conditioned, and the club culture thing of what that having a job, and of course you have to have security, you have to pay your bills and stuff like that. But my feeling when I got the information was, okay, it might be about time. I know it seems like a very blue sky way to look at it, but I was like, it might be about time. And also, as a person, I've always enjoyed networking. I've enjoyed my courses, and I kind of know quite a few people in the game in different places, which didn't mean I necessarily was going to necessarily jump into another club and straight away, and I haven't full time for other reasons. But it was probably my time where I was like, okay, I back my competence in terms of where I might be able to add, where I can add value. Always and still see Reading as such a high potential club in terms of where it's at. But for me, I just felt like there's a wider world. So you have to, and also if you look at, even if we're all football fans and we see football, there's movement all the time. So that's not, it's not to be blasé about it, and there's all different reasons for movement, but there's so much movement all the time, and you almost go, well, if I'm good, then we'll work something out. If I'm not, then I'll find something else to do. So, but yeah, you have to you do have to leverage and sort of believe in your competence. But I felt more for, I've been there 8 years, but I felt more for some other people that had come in a bit more recently. Financially, that means different things. Redundancy is not the same. They now have, maybe, I don't know if they made a move or whatever, but they've, family, maybe kids have moved school and stuff like that. That's what's not right, where someone's made a move, and actually they haven't done anything wrong. They've done their job properly, and other areas of the club haven't done their job properly, which sticks people in a real life situation that they don't deserve to be in. Those are the things that don't sit well.
And you're doing some coaching, you're doing some scouting for Fulham, but looking at Reading's academy and the future, and obviously we're all hoping a new buyer comes in soon. But over the years, Reading's academy has been fantastic. It's still, Tuesday being an example, 16-year-old making his debut. What do you think the future of Reading's academy looks like?
Yeah, that's very, I'd say, really contingent on this ownership aspect of, if the right people do come in, the potential of Reading's academy is, it has the potential for it to be like a national gem, beyond what it's been able to achieve already. Just because there's factors that speak for it, in that even competition wise, it's basically potential of a London club that's not in London, and can benefit from the fact that it's not in London, but it can benefit from London. And then everyone else that's potential competition is nicely just that little bit far enough away. So it's just right in the middle of that M4 corridor, and can benefit all round. And then even on the area that at the moment it's not a Premier League club. So although everyone wants to be in the Premier League and the first team should aspire, to get to the top level, again, for young players, there's potentially an opportunity for your academy, because the adult, or whatever, the first team, I'm not saying the standard League One is still a high standard football, do not get me wrong, and you still have to have particular tools to play in there. But if you're a League One or Championship club, in terms of potentially providing debuts and letting young players sample what it is, what first team football's like, that might offer opportunities, when, if you were in the Premier League, that the bar would be that much higher. So yeah, there is a massive opportunity for whoever's able to take over the club.
And Johnny, I think you've got a question, have you?
Yeah, just one, we have people's parents here listening, watching. What advice would you give to a parent or a young player? The best bit of advice as they're starting their football journey?
Yeah, I think it goes with something I said before, and part of, I'm doing my own coaching now, which is on pitch kind of coaching, which you call one-to-one, but also off pitch kind of mentoring support for players, different standards, some at clubs, some not, etc. But and their parents. But the biggest thing is, I'd say, is you own, like, again, goes with what was spoken about earlier, that previously there weren't academies. So I think the biggest thing is boys have to recognize they own their development. No club owns your development, and whoever is around you in terms of parents and etc. It's about you as the boy and the people that support you. And then if they have that mentality, I speak to people in this way. I just say, in the similar way where maybe a martial artist or a tennis player would have that mentality. Of course, you go and plug it into a club and a team setting. But I think a lot of boys suffer from the fact that the ones that especially at, even I guess Cat One clubs, they go, I'm at Cat One club, so I'm going to be a pro, and that's a fallacy. That's not how it works. So you have to go right. I own my development. Clearly, I've got potential because a club is giving me the opportunity to be at their club and develop at their club. Now, how can I maximize that to help myself be the very best player that I can be? If boys have that, that was said earlier, then it gets very exciting for them because as you guys said earlier, there are a lot of tools available to the players, and there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of clubs. Like obviously we live in the south of England and around the Reading area. There are a lot of clubs if you're willing to travel, and as you get older, there are a lot of clubs. So the opportunity is there, but they have to have the right mentality in relation to practice, focus, and the genuine hunger for it.
And Dylan, have you got a final question for Kobina?
No, you see, look, Kobina, I'm in South Africa. The academy system here is well, they call them academies, but there's not even academy. It's all about a parent, a guy who calls himself a coach, a guy who calls himself an agent.
Yeah.
There's millions of South African kids that all want to be professional footballers. We've got two leagues, League One, the Premier League, 16 teams in each league.
Yep.
That's the professional level. Then you've got SAB, you've got Vodacom, which is kind of like a junior league, amateur leagues. It's just too big a country and too many teams. So the academy set up that the likes of Chiefs and Pirates have got. They have this thing that, like the under-21s or the under-23s in the Premier League, they're still playing players at 23 years old thinking that they're young players. And these kids at 14, 15, 16 never get the opportunity because the senior players are always playing the games, and there's no development, there's no pathway for these young players. And the majority, I would say 90% of them at 20, 21, 22, that don't play any games because they're considered not good enough. Yeah. They drift out the game. And I have a good chat with Simon Osborne, who's working at Bromley Academy and doing it part-time, doing it off his own back, not getting paid a penny for it. And he's got all these kids that, have got all the gizmos, all the, the data, all the videos, have got everything on it. And when he takes them for a session, they don't know the basics, from 12, 13, 14, they can't pass a ball in a straight line. And what frustrates him is, he's trying to tell them, or he's trying to help them develop and grow from a, I wouldn't say an old school way. Yet the parents are all saying, "Oh, but my son can do this, my son can do that, my daughter's good at this, my daughter's good at that," and he's having to tell them that, well, no, they're not. And I mean, it must be hard for yourself as a coach. Now you're doing one-on-ones, which is great. You're scouting for Fulham, which is absolutely fantastic. It must be difficult now because the things that are available to young players now, from social media, data analysis, videos, statistics. Back in the day when I was a kid, it was all about playing the game. It was all about listening to the coach, being able to pass, being able to run, being able to shoot, being able to dribble, being able to defend. Yeah, that was the basics, and like I say, your talent came out of that. 100%. So and I see things here. You wouldn't believe the amount of talented 15, 16-year-old players, which, believe me, no the country can develop these players for self-taught ability on fields that are not worth taking a cow on or walking your dog on.
Pitches, exactly.
They can play football in a different way, but when it comes to playing in a senior level and a professional level, They just haven't got the basics. They haven't got that technique. They haven't got that temperament, and it's very, very hard for kids here in the professional game to break in, because it's all down to money. At the end of the day, it's all down to money.
Yeah.
And I believe that's different now in the academies in the UK.
Yeah, sorry. So you're saying you're asking a question on the contrast, or?
Yeah, just like I say, from like I said, for instance, at my last club, you have to have, it's called a DDC team. It's a development league, but it's under 23. So for me, I was trying to push it to an under 18s. So the youngest player is 15, 16, 17. The oldest player is 19 at a push, right? But they never get that opportunity. They never get that, because they don't, in this country, they don't feel that if a kid's under 22, he's not ready for the first team. And yet you've got a 16-year-old who makes his debut for Reading. You've got Yamal, who was wonderful in the Euros, and he's doing brilliant for Barcelona.
Yeah.
But here, they never get that opportunity. Where in the UK, you do, if you're good enough, you get that chance.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in Ghana, so obviously it's a bit of away from South Africa. It's a different part of Africa, but there's similar structural things that, if there is no question that the talent is there, but there are structural things that need help, need support, need like short, medium, long-term plan, to try and unlock some of these things, like you say, because there's a lot of locked up potential. There's talent I'm aware of that they can't travel based on work permit issues and stuff like that. So, if they could, they'd go and elsewhere and earn money for themselves, their families and stuff, and potentially reinvest back into Africa, into some really interesting things and stuff. But the way passports work and work permits work, that can't happen. So then it's just, and I don't want to play it down as to how deep some of these issues go, because they are quite deep, but there is always an opportunity if the right people can put their heads together, and the right people put usually their monies together. You can come up with something. So but around the world, there's all manner of different things that create blocks. But being of African heritage, I've had one or two conversations. I can see things changing over the next amount. I might be grayer and old by the time it happens, but you can see there will be change across. There's a lot of things happening in the Middle East now, as well, as people know, in sport in different ways. So the world is shifting in terms of how people even consume sport, and also how people are connecting to do different things. So hopefully things like what you're talking about can be addressed, because I think people are interested as well. People from Europe, it can get a bit saturated. It can get a bit, we've done, the leagues are set up, everything's set up here, whereas people that are a bit enterprising and fancy doing something interesting, there are, like, what you've done. You're in South Africa now. There's different places that require people that are excited about developing some new things.
And Kobina, I think your point there relates to the ownership situation at Reading as well. Just finally, if we've been in the Premier League, if you've got the right structure in place, then the first team can do well. The academy is doing well. We've got a great academy at Reading, a great facility. But look, just wanted to say thanks ever so much for your time. Really appreciate you being a guest and giving us that insight. And wish you well at Fulham and beyond. And who knows, maybe we'll see you coaching a Premier League club or something one day. But best of luck with all that, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.